This entry refers to the theory of micropenis worship. The idea claims that in certain fringe spiritual circles and obscure historical sects, individuals with unusually small genitals were seen not as weak or inadequate, but as divine. The theory points to rare cultural beliefs that considered sexual modesty or absence of virility as signs of purity, humility, or closeness to higher realms. Some versions link the theory to esoteric interpretations of fertility cults, suggesting that a lack of physical dominance symbolized submission to the gods or a detachment from carnal temptation. A few amateur historians bring up early depictions in art from remote regions of Asia and Northern Europe, where statues and carvings appear to highlight small or even absent features on otherwise exaggerated bodies, though mainstream scholars argue that these interpretations are a stretch at best. One group cited in online discussions is a rumored sect from the early 2010s that gathered in underground forums, allegedly promoting a kind of reverence for what they called the Blessed Curse. They believed those born this way were chosen to resist the temptations of ego, lust, and power. There are no official records or mainstream anthropological studies confirming any society that universally praised the condition. Still, the theory lives on in some obscure corners of the internet where users swap speculative documents, grainy art photos, and misinterpreted rituals as evidence of a lost spiritual code. It's unclear whether this belief ever had a real following or if it's simply a fringe myth built from modern satire and misread history. Either way, it's one of the more unexpected twists in the conspiracy world. The Atlanta blackout of 2017 refers to the complete power failure that shut down the world's busiest airport for over 11 hours on December 17, 2017. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport went completely dark, stranding thousands of passengers and canceling more than 1,400 flights during one of the busiest travel weekends of the year. The official explanation centers on a fire in an underground electrical facility that supposedly damaged both the main power line and backup systems simultaneously. But conspiracy researchers point to several troubling inconsistencies in this narrative. The timing raises immediate red flags. The blackout occurred just days before Christmas, when airport security and surveillance systems would be operating at maximum capacity to monitor holiday travelers. Some theorists suggest this was a deliberate test of infrastructure vulnerability or a cover for covert operations requiring the airport's complete shutdown. Georgia Power, the utility company responsible, claimed that a single fire somehow disabled both primary and backup power systems. Critics note that modern airports, especially ones handling over 100 million passengers annually, have multiple redundant safety systems specifically designed to prevent total power loss. The simultaneous failure of all backup generators defies standard engineering protocols. Witnesses reported seeing unusual government vehicle activity around the airport perimeter during the blackout hours. Several passengers documented federal agents and unmarked vehicles in areas typically restricted to airport personnel. Flight tracking data from that evening shows mysterious gaps where certain aircraft movements were scrubbed from public records. The blackout also coincided with heightened tensions over alleged Russian interference in American infrastructure. Cybersecurity experts had warned that power grids and transportation hubs were prime targets for foreign cyber warfare testing. Some researchers believe the Atlanta incident was either a successful attack or a controlled demonstration of vulnerability. The airport's role as a major Delta Airlines hub meant that the blackout affected not just local travel, but created a ripple effect across the entire national air transportation network. For theorists, this suggests the incident may have been designed to test the fragility of America's interconnected travel infrastructure. Perhaps most suspicious of all, the cleanup and investigation concluded remarkably quickly for such a catastrophic system failure, with minimal public disclosure of technical findings or preventive measures. Roman metaphysics refers to the alleged hidden spiritual and philosophical systems that supposedly guided the Roman Empire's unprecedented dominance for over 1,000 years. This theory claims that Roman leaders possessed advanced knowledge of metaphysical principles that allowed them to manipulate reality itself. The The most striking aspect involves the systematic use of sacred geometry in Roman architecture, with the Pantheon serving as the primary example. The building's dome creates a perfect sphere when combined with its floor, and the oculus at the top allegedly functions as a cosmic aperture that channels celestial energies. Metaphysics in this context refers to the study of reality beyond the physical world, encompassing consciousness, energy, and the fundamental nature of existence. The Romans supposedly understood how to harness these invisible forces through specific rituals, architectural designs, and governmental structures. The theory points to several compelling pieces of evidence. Roman military formations, particularly the testudo or tortoise formation, are said to create geometric patterns that generate protective energy fields. The positioning of Roman roads across Europe allegedly follows ley lines, creating a vast energy grid that strengthened imperial control. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, is often cited as a key figure who encoded metaphysical teachings into his work Meditations. Supporters claim his writings contain hidden instructions for consciousness manipulation disguised as Stoic philosophy. The Roman calendar system also plays a crucial role in these claims. The original 10-month calendar supposedly aligned with natural cosmic cycles, and the later addition of January and February deliberately disrupted humanity's connection to celestial rhythms. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect involves the Roman practice of divination through haruspicy, examining animal entrails for omens. The theory suggests this wasn't primitive superstition, but an advanced technique for reading quantum fluctuations in organic matter. The supposed suppression of this knowledge began with Constantine's conversion to Christianity in the 4th century, with the Vatican allegedly inheriting and concealing these metaphysical secrets within its archives. This entry reveals the elaborate theory that Bethesda Softworks, the gaming studio behind the Elder Scrolls and Fallout series, secretly created Bitcoin under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. The conspiracy emerged from a detailed post on the Bitcoin Talk forum, where an anonymous user constructed what they called compelling evidence linking the video game company to the world's first cryptocurrency. The timing alone raises eyebrows. Bitcoin's foundational white paper was published on October 31, 2008, just 3 days after Fallout 3 hit American shelves on October 28th. According to the theorist, this represented perfect sleight of hand, while tech enthusiasts were glued to their screens exploring post-apocalyptic Washington, D.C., the real revolution was happening right under their noses. The visual evidence seems almost too obvious to ignore. Both Bitcoin and Bethesda feature prominently stylized letter B logos, with the Bethesda B appearing in a different color from the rest of the company name. But the smoking gun, according to believers, lies in the letters themselves. The full corporate name, Bethesda Softworks, a ZeniMax media company, contains every single letter needed to spell both Satoshi Nakamoto and Bitcoin. Christopher Weaver, Bethesda's founder, possesses exactly the credentials needed to pull off such a technological feat. This MIT-trained scientist earned dual master's degrees in computer science and Japanese from Wesleyan University, plus advanced degrees in physics. The Japanese connection feels particularly significant given that Satoshi Nakamoto appears to be a Japanese name, though the real Bitcoin creator's identity remains unknown. Weaver pioneered the first real-time physics engine for sports simulation and spent decades working on cutting-edge technology ranging from satellite networks to congressional data systems. His resume reads like a blueprint for someone capable of revolutionary cryptographic work. He even served as a technical advisor to various government agencies, including the White House Office of Technology Policy. The theory gained traction partly because of Bitcoin's enduring mystery. Satoshi Nakamoto vanished from public view in 2010, leaving behind no definitive proof of identity and roughly 1 million bitcoins worth billions of dollars. This void created fertile ground for speculation, connecting the anonymous creator to established technology entities. Forum responses ranged from semi-convinced analysis to outright dismissal, with some users pointing out Bethesda's notorious history with game bugs as evidence against their ability to create something as technically sound as Bitcoin. Others appreciated the elaborate nature of the theory, while questioning its logical foundations. The conspiracy theory represents a perfect storm of coincidental timing, visual similarities, and one man's impressive technical background. Whether Christopher Weaver spent 2008 secretly revolutionizing digital currency between Elder Scrolls development meetings remains unproven, but the circumstantial evidence continues to fascinate those seeking answers to cryptocurrency's greatest mystery. Day the Earth Screamed refers to a collection of unexplained acoustic phenomena that have baffled scientists and fueled theories about hidden forces affecting our planet. These mysterious sounds manifest in several distinct forms. Skyquakes produce thunderous booming noises that seem to originate from clear skies, rattling windows, and shaking buildings despite no visible source. Unlike normal thunder, these occur during perfect weather conditions and can be heard across vast distances. The most documented cases include the Seneca guns around Seneca Lake in New York, where residents have reported cannon-like explosions for over 2 centuries. Similar phenomena plague locations worldwide, from the Netherlands' mist poofers to Japan's uminari, literally meaning cries from the sea. Then there's the hum, a persistent low-frequency drone that affects only certain individuals in specific geographical areas. The Taos hum in New Mexico has tormented residents since the 1990s, with government studies confirming that roughly 2% of the population can hear frequencies between 32 and 80 Hz that seem to have no identifiable source. Deep ocean monitoring systems have captured equally puzzling recordings. The upsweep consists of narrowband sounds that rise in frequency over several seconds, detected consistently in the Pacific since 1991. Its seasonal patterns peak during spring and fall, yet no marine life or geological process can account for its regularity. More recently, high-altitude balloon experiments have detected unidentified rumblings in the stratosphere. These infrasound recordings, conducted by Sandia National Laboratories, pick up mysterious low-frequency noise alongside expected sounds like aircraft and thunder. Some researchers propose these phenomena result from atmospheric plasma interactions, underground gas releases, or unknown geological processes. Others suggest more exotic explanations involving electromagnetic interference or undisclosed military testing. The timing and global distribution of these events have conspiracy theorists wondering if they represent communication attempts, planetary stress responses, or evidence of technologies operating beyond public knowledge. Flat ontology represents a radical philosophical position that has quietly infiltrated conspiracy circles, suggesting that all objects in existence occupy the same level of reality. This means humans, rocks, fictional characters, corporations, and even ideas all possess equal ontological status. The concept emerged from object-oriented ontology, developed by philosophers like Graham Harman and Levi Bryant in the early 2000s. Rather than placing humans at the center of reality or creating hierarchies between different types of existence, flat ontology argues that everything simply exists on the same plane. This seemingly academic theory has found unexpected applications in fringe communities. Some use it to legitimize the reality of tulpas, thought forms created through focused meditation that practitioners claim develop independent consciousness. If fictional characters and human thoughts occupy the same ontological level as physical matter, then these mental constructs could theoretically achieve genuine existence. The philosophy also appears in discussions about corporate personhood taken to extreme conclusions. If corporations truly exist as objects equal to humans, some argue this validates treating them as living entities with their own agendas and consciousness. This feeds into theories about corporate entities operating beyond human control or understanding. Certain internet communities have adopted flat ontology to justify the reality of online personas and digital identities. Virtual characters, social media profiles, and even memes are treated as genuine entities rather than mere representations. The boundary between the digital and physical dissolves when everything exists on equal footing. The implications extend to reality itself. If all objects are ontologically flat, then the distinction between consensus reality and alternative realities becomes meaningless. This provides philosophical backing for those who claim parallel dimensions, alternate timelines, or completely different versions of reality are equally valid and accessible. Critics argue that flat ontology, while intellectually interesting, creates a framework where any belief system can claim legitimacy by simply declaring its objects real. The 66 books of the Bible represents a numerological conspiracy centered on the deliberate construction of biblical canon. This theory suggests the Protestant Bible's final count was engineered to encode hidden meanings rather than determined through purely theological reasoning. The number 66 sits uncomfortably close to 666, the number traditionally associated with the beast in Revelation. Theorists point out that this proximity cannot be coincidental, especially when examining the complex process that determined which texts made it into the final biblical collection. The Council of Trent in 1563 officially defined the Catholic canon at 73 books, while Protestant reformers later settled on 66. This reduction involved removing 7 deuterocanonical books that had been included in earlier versions. Critics of the official narrative question why Protestant scholars like Martin Luther and later theologians chose this specific number when other arrangements were possible. The binding numbers theory extends beyond simple counting. Each book contains verse and chapter divisions that weren't part of the original texts. Stephen Langton introduced chapter divisions around 1200, while verse numbers arrived even later through the work of Robert Estienne in 1551. These numerical frameworks create what some researchers call a mathematical matrix within the text itself. When certain books are grouped or their verse counts are calculated in specific ways, patterns emerge that seem too structured to be accidental. The theory gains traction when examining which books were excluded. The Gospel of Thomas, the Book of Enoch, and other texts that contained different theological perspectives were systematically removed. This editing process appears to have prioritized reaching the 66 number rather than preserving the most historically accurate collection. Supporters of this theory point to the medieval practice of biblical numerology, where scribes and scholars regularly encoded mathematical relationships into religious texts. The final 66 book structure allows for numerous symbolic calculations that align with esoteric traditions predating Christianity. This theory claims that Groundhog Day, the supposed centuries-old tradition of a groundhog predicting weather patterns, was actually fabricated entirely for the 1993 Bill Murray film. According to this theory, Hollywood studios needed a quirky American tradition to build their time loop comedy around, but couldn't find anything suitable that existed. So they allegedly created the entire concept from scratch, complete with fake historical records and planted newspaper articles dating back decades. The conspiracy suggests that Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, was a struggling small town that eagerly participated in this elaborate hoax in exchange for the tourism revenue the movie would generate. Theorists point to what they claim are inconsistencies in historical records about the tradition, arguing that references to groundhog weather prediction before the 1980s are surprisingly sparse and often vague. They highlight how convenient it was that this obscure regional custom happened to be perfect for a major motion picture plot. The theory extends to claim that other media references to Groundhog Day before the movie were retroactively inserted into archives, and that the famous Punxsutawney Phil is actually a series of different groundhogs with no real lineage. Some versions of this conspiracy involve the National Weather Service, suggesting they helped legitimize the fake tradition to deflect attention from their own forecasting limitations. The theorists note how the holiday gained massive national recognition only after the movie's release, despite supposedly existing for over a century. The most dedicated believers in this theory claim that investigating the true origins of Groundhog Day will reveal a network of fabricated American folklore designed to boost local economies and provide Hollywood with ready-made story concepts. Torsion fields represent one of the most intriguing intersections between legitimate physics and fringe science claims. According to researchers who support this theory, these invisible energy fields emerge from the spinning motion of subatomic particles and supposedly permeate all of space. The concept gained serious attention through the work of Soviet astrophysicist Nikolai Kozyrev in the 1950s, who claimed he could detect what he called time emanations from rotating objects and astronomical bodies. Kozyrev's experiments involved measuring tiny changes in the weight of gyroscopes and pendulums, which he attributed to these mysterious torsion effects. Russian scientist Anatoly Akimov later expanded on this work in the 1980s and 1990s, establishing the International Institute for Theoretical and Applied Physics in Moscow specifically to study torsion field phenomena. Akimov claimed that torsion fields could travel faster than light, carry information without energy transfer, and interact directly with human consciousness. The alleged properties of torsion fields read like science fiction. Supporters claim they can enable instantaneous communication across any distance, provide unlimited free energy, and even influence biological processes and mental states. Some researchers have reported that spinning objects create detectable torsion field signatures that persist even after the spinning stops. Perhaps most controversially, several scientists have suggested that torsion fields explain psychic phenomena, remote viewing, and other paranormal abilities. They theorize that human consciousness itself generates torsion field patterns that can affect physical reality and connect minds across space. While mainstream physics acknowledges torsion as a legitimate mathematical concept in certain theories of gravity, the extraordinary claims surrounding practical torsion field applications remain highly disputed and unverified by conventional scientific institutions. This bit refers to unexplained screaming sounds reportedly heard throughout the Bethnal Green area of East London. Residents and visitors have described hearing piercing, agonized screams echoing through the streets during late-night hours, particularly around the old Victorian terraced houses and abandoned industrial buildings. These aren't the typical sounds of urban nightlife or domestic disputes that you might expect in any busy neighborhood. The screams are said to be distinctly human, but carry an otherworldly quality that makes witnesses question what they're actually hearing. Some describe them as coming from multiple directions simultaneously, making it impossible to pinpoint a source. Others report that the sounds seem to move through the area, starting from one street and traveling to another within minutes. What makes these reports particularly unsettling is their consistency across decades. Local folklore suggests the screaming began sometime in the mid-20th century and has continued sporadically ever since. Witnesses range from longtime residents to newcomers who had no prior knowledge of the phenomenon. The timing often coincides with significant dates in the area's history, leading some to connect the sounds to tragic events from Bethnal Green's past. The neighborhood has seen its share of hardship, from wartime casualties to industrial accidents. Skeptics point to acoustic tricks caused by the dense urban environment, where sound can bounce between buildings in unexpected ways. Others suggest the screams might be misidentified animal calls or mechanical sounds from nearby infrastructure. But those who've heard them insist these explanations fall short of capturing the deeply human nature of what they experienced. Rational gravity represents a collection of fringe physics theories that attempt to explain gravitational effects through mechanical processes rather than accepting Einstein's general relativity or even Newton's gravitational force. The most prominent figure in this movement is James Carter, a self-taught physicist who spent decades developing what he calls the principle of gravitational expansion. Carter's theory, first presented in his 1970 book, Gravity Does Not Exist, proposes that what we experience as gravity is actually the result of matter constantly expanding at an accelerating rate. According to Carter, the Earth pushes upward against objects rather than objects being pulled downward by gravitational force. Carter demonstrates his ideas using smoke rings created with garbage cans and fog machines in his backyard, believing these mechanical interactions model the behavior of his theoretical particles called circlons. These ring-shaped structures supposedly form the building blocks of all matter and energy in the universe. In Carter's mechanical cosmos, everything operates like interlocking gears and nuts and bolts, requiring no mysterious forces acting at a distance. The rational gravity movement attracts people who find mainstream physics too mathematically abstract and prefer explanations they can visualize mechanically. These theorists often reject both quantum mechanics and relativity, viewing them as unnecessarily complex mystical concepts divorced from physical reality. Other variations include theories that gravity emerges from electromagnetic interactions, that the Earth is electrically charged and attracts oppositely charged objects, or that gravitational effects result from pressure differences in an underlying medium. Some propose that what appears to be gravity is actually inertial effects from the universe's rotation or expansion. Carter has published multiple books and wall charts detailing his complete alternative physics, including his own periodic table based on Circlon structures. Margaret Wertheim featured him prominently in her book Physics on the Fringe, calling him the Leonardo da Vinci of outsider theorists. These alternative gravity theories appeal to those who believe mainstream science has become too removed from observable mechanical reality and that simpler explanations must exist for fundamental forces. The Bohr theory dream origins conspiracy suggests that Nobel Prize winner Niels Bohr's revolutionary atomic model didn't come from scientific calculation, but from a vivid supernatural dream that contained impossible knowledge. According to the widely circulated account, Bohr experienced a lucid dream where he found himself sitting on the surface of the sun. Around him, electrons moved in perfect circular orbits like tiny planets in a miniature solar system. When he woke, Bohr allegedly sketched what he had seen and developed his famous atomic model that electrons orbit the nucleus in specific energy levels. The conspiracy centers on a troubling question: how could a dream accurately predict the structure of atoms decades before we had technology to observe them directly? Bohr's model, proposed in 1913, wouldn't be validated until electron microscopy advanced in the 1980s. Several physicists who worked alongside Bohr at the Copenhagen Institute reported that he possessed an almost supernatural intuition about quantum mechanics. Werner Heisenberg noted that Bohr seemed to know things about atomic behavior that couldn't be derived from existing mathematics. Even Einstein, who famously disagreed with quantum theory, admitted Bohr demonstrated insights that appeared to come from beyond rational deduction. The theory suggests Bohr's dream wasn't random neural firing during sleep, but contact with an intelligence that wanted humanity to unlock atomic secrets. Some researchers point to the fact that multiple quantum physics breakthroughs occurred to different scientists around the same time period between 1900 and 1925, as if the knowledge was being deliberately distributed. Documents from Bohr's personal archives released in the 1990s reveal he kept detailed dream journals throughout his career and claimed several other scientific insights originated from what he called meaningful dreams. This theory claims that volcanic eruptions are not natural geological events, but are actually nuclear explosions or nuclear-powered phenomena being disguised by world governments and scientific institutions. Believers point to the immense energy output of major eruptions, noting that the 1980 Mount St. Helens explosion released energy equivalent to 400 million tons of TNT. They argue this level of destruction could only come from nuclear devices, not molten rock. The theory gained traction after researchers discovered that volcanic lightning produces similar electromagnetic signatures to nuclear detonations. Conspiracy theorists seized on declassified documents showing that both the United States and Soviet Union conducted underground nuclear tests near volcanic regions during the Cold War, suggesting these tests were used to trigger or simulate eruptions. Supporters highlight the Toba supervolcano eruption that occurred 74,000 years ago, which nearly drove humanity to extinction. They claim this was actually an ancient nuclear war, pointing to elevated radiation levels found in certain geological layers from that period. Some even suggest that modern volcanoes are being artificially triggered using buried nuclear devices as a form of weather warfare. The presence of rare isotopes like helium-3 in volcanic gases is cited as evidence of nuclear reactions occurring deep underground. Believers note that these same isotopes are found in nuclear reactors and weapons testing sites. More recent claims focus on the 2010 Eyjafjallajökull eruption in Iceland, which grounded air travel across Europe for weeks. Conspiracy theorists suggest this was a deliberately triggered nuclear event designed to test global response systems and economic disruption capabilities. They also point to the fact that many volcanic monitoring stations use equipment nearly identical to nuclear detection systems, arguing this reveals the true nature of what scientists are actually measuring. Field consciousness suggests that human awareness operates more like a radio receiving signals than a computer generating thoughts. Rather than consciousness emerging solely from brain activity, this theory proposes that our minds tap into a vast, invisible field that surrounds and connects all living beings. The concept gained scientific attention through biologist Rupert Sheldrake's work on morphic fields in the 1980s. Sheldrake theorized that invisible information fields influence the behavior and development of organisms, creating what he called morphic resonance. When enough members of a species learn a new behavior, this information becomes available to other members through the field, regardless of physical distance. The Global Consciousness Project at Princeton University has been collecting data since 1998 using a network of random number generators placed around the world. Researchers noticed that these devices, which should produce completely random sequences, began showing statistical patterns during major global events. The September 11th attacks, the 2004 tsunami, and even the death of Princess Diana apparently caused measurable deviations in randomness across multiple continents. Princeton's Peer Laboratory spent decades studying consciousness-related anomalies before closing in 2007. Their experiments suggested that human intention could influence electronic devices and random systems in ways that conventional physics cannot explain. Subjects consistently produced results that deviated from pure chance by small but statistically significant margins. Remote viewing programs, including the CIA's Stargate project, operated on similar principles. Military personnel claimed to accurately describe distant locations and events using only geographic coordinates, suggesting consciousness could access information beyond the physical reach of the human body. Some researchers point to simultaneous discoveries throughout history as evidence of field consciousness. The development of calculus by both Newton and Leibniz, or the independent invention of the telephone by multiple inventors, might represent information becoming available through collective fields rather than individual genius. Stingray trackers represent one of the most sophisticated surveillance tools operating in plain sight across Washington, D.C. These cell site simulators, also known by their technical designation as International Mobile Subscriber Identity Catchers, function by masquerading as legitimate cell phone towers. When your phone automatically connects to what it believes is the nearest cell tower, it might actually be connecting to a briefcase-sized device operated by law enforcement agencies. The Stingray system tricks every mobile device within its range into revealing its location data, call records, and in some advanced configurations, the actual content of communications. The Harris Corporation developed this technology initially for military applications overseas, but it migrated to domestic law enforcement with minimal public oversight. Documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests revealed that agencies from the FBI to local police departments have deployed these devices thousands of times across the DC metropolitan area. What makes this particularly concerning is the scope of data collection. A single Stingray deployment doesn't just target suspected criminals. Every phone within a several block radius automatically connects, meaning hundreds or thousands of innocent citizens have their communications intercepted during each operation. The DC Metropolitan Police Department acquired Stingray technology in 2006, but kept its existence secret from both the public and defense attorneys for nearly a decade. Court documents show that prosecutors routinely concealed the use of Stingray evidence, instead claiming they obtained location data through conventional methods. Federal agencies operating in the nation's capital have used even more advanced variants. The upgraded Hailstorm system can intercept 4G communications, while newer models can allegedly crack basic encryption protocols in real time. Perhaps most telling is what happened when this technology finally came to light. Rather than face public scrutiny about mass surveillance capabilities, multiple agencies chose to drop criminal cases entirely rather than reveal how they obtained their evidence. Eyes Wide Shut kidnapping ending refers to claims that Stanley Kubrick's final film originally contained a much darker conclusion involving the abduction of the main character's daughter. According to this theory, the legendary director filmed an ending where the secret society featured throughout the movie takes the child as punishment for her father's intrusion into their world. Kubrick died just 4 days after showing the final cut to Warner Brothers executives in March 1999. Conspiracy theorists point to this timing as suspicious, suggesting the studio panicked over the original ending's explicit revelation of how elite groups operate and control society through blackmail and intimidation. The theory centers on the toy store scene near the film's end, where Helena Harford briefly disappears while her parents argue. In the theatrical version, she simply wanders off and returns moments later. However, theorists claim Kubrick originally shot this as the moment when cult members, positioned throughout the store, quietly spirit the girl away while her distracted parents remain unaware. Supporters of this theory note that 2 men in dark coats appear to be following the family through the store, and that Helena is drawn to a specific display case containing dolls and stuffed animals. They interpret these elements as Kubrick's subtle way of showing predatory behavior, even in the edited version that reached theaters. The filmmaker's widow, Christiane Kubrick, and others involved in production have denied these claims. Yet theorists point to Kubrick's meticulous attention to detail and his history of embedding hidden meanings in previous works like The Shining and 2001: A Space Odyssey as evidence he would have crafted such a subversive ending. Some versions of this theory extend further, claiming Warner Brothers not only removed the kidnapping sequence, but also digitally altered other scenes to obscure the secret society's true nature and methods of operation. Window areas represent specific geographical locations where the boundary between our reality and others supposedly becomes thin or permeable. These zones, scattered across the globe, allegedly serve as gateways for interdimensional beings, unexplained phenomena, and encounters that defy conventional understanding. The concept suggests that certain coordinates on Earth act like cosmic weak spots where the fabric of spacetime develops cracks. Within these boundaries, witnesses report dramatically higher rates of UFO sightings, cryptid encounters, time distortions, and electronic equipment failures. The effects often extend beyond just seeing strange things. People describe feeling watched, experiencing missing time, or finding themselves in locations they don't remember traveling to. The Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts spans roughly 200 square miles and includes the Hockomock Swamp. Since the 1700s, this area has accumulated reports of ghostly apparitions, mysterious lights, Bigfoot sightings, and even cattle found in impossible positions. Local electromagnetic readings frequently spike without explanation, and compasses spin wildly when brought into certain sections. Skinwalker Ranch in Utah has become perhaps the most documented window area, with decades of scientific investigation yielding thousands of anomalous readings. Researchers have recorded objects materializing and dematerializing, animals appearing with surgical precision wounds, and radiation signatures that shouldn't exist in nature. The ranch's previous owners abandoned it after experiencing what they described as a sustained campaign of supernatural harassment. The Bennington Triangle in Vermont earned its reputation during the 1940s when 5 people vanished without leaving any trace. Search teams found no footprints, no torn clothing, no signs of struggle, as if these individuals had simply stepped out of existence. Decades later, hikers still report feeling an overwhelming urge to leave certain trails, describing an invisible pressure that pushes them away from specific areas. These locations often share common characteristics. They sit near geological fault lines, contain high concentrations of quartz or magnetic minerals, and frequently appear in indigenous folklore as places to avoid. The electromagnetic properties of these areas may create natural conditions that somehow interact with dimensions beyond our perception, though mainstream science remains skeptical of such explanations. Aetherians represent one of the more esoteric conspiracy theories involving beings who supposedly exist between our physical dimension and higher planes of reality. According to believers, these entities have transcended normal human existence and now inhabit what they call the etheric realm, The theory gained traction in underground forums during the 2010s when several individuals claimed to have made contact with Aetherians through specific meditation techniques and electromagnetic frequency manipulation. These contactees described the Aetherians as former humans who discovered methods to shift their consciousness into a parallel dimensional space that overlaps with our own reality. Dr. Marina Volkov, a former physicist from Estonia, documented over 40 alleged encounters before her research disappeared from academic databases in 2018. Her notes, leaked through encrypted channels, detail how Aetherians supposedly retain human memories and personalities, but exist in a state of pure energy consciousness. They can allegedly observe our world while remaining largely undetected, occasionally manifesting as unexplained electromagnetic anomalies or brief visual distortions. The most compelling cases involve the Riverside Group, 7 researchers from various universities who vanished simultaneously in 2019 while conducting consciousness expansion experiments. Witnesses reported seeing strange light formations and hearing disembodied voices speaking in the researchers' exact vocal patterns weeks after their disappearance. Believers claim Aetherians recruit new members by appearing to individuals during near-death experiences or deep meditative states, offering them the choice to abandon physical form and join their interdimensional collective. Skeptics point out the convenient lack of physical evidence, though supporters argue this absence itself proves the theory, since Aetherians exist beyond our material detection methods. The conspiracy suggests that certain government black projects have been attempting to establish communication protocols with these entities since the 1970s, viewing them as the ultimate intelligence asset. The moon built by NASA theory takes lunar conspiracy thinking to its absolute extreme. Rather than questioning whether we landed on the moon, this theory claims NASA actually constructed the entire moon itself as an artificial satellite. Believers point to several lunar anomalies as evidence of artificial construction. The moon's unusually large size relative to Earth, its perfect circular orbit, and its synchronized rotation that keeps one face permanently hidden all fuel these claims. They argue these characteristics are too convenient to be natural. The theory suggests NASA began this massive construction project in the 1940s, decades before their public formation. Proponents claim the agency used advanced anti-gravity technology and materials unknown to mainstream science. They point to the moon's hollow-sounding seismic readings from Apollo missions as proof of artificial internal structure. Specific focus centers on the Mer Orientale Basin, which conspiracy theorists describe as a construction seam rather than an impact crater. They claim the perfectly circular shape and geometric patterns visible in lunar photography reveal underlying mechanical framework. The timeline becomes particularly elaborate when explaining how NASA supposedly maintained this secret while simultaneously faking the moon landings. According to this theory, the agency needed to control the landing narrative to prevent astronauts from discovering evidence of the moon's artificial nature during surface operations. Some versions incorporate claims about mining operations and hidden bases on the lunar far side. They suggest the moon serves as a staging ground for deeper space operations that remain classified from public knowledge. The theory requires believing that every nation's space program, including rival countries like Russia and China, participates in maintaining this deception about the moon's true artificial nature. This entry refers to the theory that ISIS doesn't exist. The claim argues that the entire organization was manufactured, either digitally, through intelligence agencies, or by media manipulation. Instead of being a real, organically grown terrorist group, the suggestion is that ISIS was a scripted threat, built from pre-recorded footage, recycled actors, and staged events. One version points to how high-quality production, multiple camera angles, and perfect lighting were used in ISIS videos, which critics claim is unusual for a group operating in alleged war zones. Some even note that the audio mixes, camera transitions, and on-screen graphics were suspiciously professional, more like propaganda films than improvised recordings from the desert. The theory often connects back to intelligence operations. Some claim Western or Middle Eastern intelligence agencies created the ISIS persona to justify military operations, redirect public fear, or destabilize regions for political gain. There are also unusual overlaps. For example, certain individuals allegedly appeared in both crisis footage and later in recruitment videos, leading to accusations of actors being reused. A few online threads even chart out supposed location mismatches in video metadata, like sand dunes shown in what turned out to be Californian terrain. One of the more specific claims ties in with a 2012 Pentagon document that allegedly discussed using a Salafist principality as a strategic tool in Syria. Some interpret this as a blueprint for what later became known as ISIS. Skeptics point out the abrupt rise and fall of the group, dominating global headlines for years, then suddenly disappearing. The theory claims this media arc followed a script designed to maintain fear during a particular geopolitical cycle before quietly being shelved. Bashir Kouchacji calls refer to one of the most relentless harassment campaigns in recorded history. For 11 years, from 1982 to 1993, a Lebanese-American restaurateur named Bashir Kouchacji received 15 to 20 threatening phone calls every single day from an anonymous tormentor known only as L'Enfant. The caller used a disturbing, high-pitched voice that mimicked a young child, delivering death threats and psychological torment to Kouchacji, his family members, employees, and anyone associated with his Washington, D.C. Moroccan restaurant. The harassment extended beyond phone calls when vandals scratched Stars of David across his car, suggesting the attacks had anti-Semitic motivations. What makes this case particularly chilling is its connection to Kouchatsi's earlier trauma. In 1974, while living in Beirut, Lebanon, Kouchacji was kidnapped by unknown assailants who tortured him for 5 days, accusing him of being a CIA agent. After his family negotiated his release, he returned to the United States and built a successful restaurant business on the East Coast. The phone harassment began 8 years after his kidnapping, raising questions about whether the two incidents were connected. The caller demonstrated intimate knowledge of Kouchatsi's daily activities and personal relationships, suggesting sophisticated surveillance capabilities. Law enforcement traced the calls to various payphones throughout the Washington, D.C. area, but the caller's identity remained completely hidden. The psychological warfare proved devastatingly effective. The constant threats drove Kouchacji to multiple psychiatric hospitalizations as his mental health deteriorated under the relentless assault. Even when he committed himself to mental health facilities, the threatening calls somehow reached him inside the supposedly secure institutions. Then in 1993, the calls stopped as abruptly as they had begun. No explanation was ever provided, no arrests were made, and no motive was ever established. The complete cessation suggests either the caller died, was imprisoned for unrelated crimes, or simply achieved their goal of destroying Kouchatsi's peace of mind. The case remains one of America's most disturbing unsolved mysteries, featuring elements that conspiracy theorists point to as evidence of organized intelligence operations or coordinated psychological warfare campaigns against targeted individuals. Magdelena Solis, known as La Madrina or the High Priestess of Blood, operated what appeared to be a ritualistic cult in rural Mexico during the 1960s. But conspiracy researchers suggest the official story barely scratches the surface of what actually occurred in the remote village of Yerba Buena. The accepted narrative describes Solis and her brother convincing impoverished villagers they were reincarnated Aztec deities, demanding human offerings in exchange for promised treasures. However, investigators point to several disturbing inconsistencies in the case files. First, the cult attracted followers with surprising speed, far beyond what two individuals could reasonably accomplish through simple manipulation. Some researchers propose Solis was connected to a broader network of occult practitioners operating throughout central Mexico, with Yerba Buena serving as just one location in a larger operation. The timing raises additional questions. Multiple witness accounts describe cult activities beginning months before Solis allegedly arrived in the village. Local police reports, later suppressed, mentioned strange ceremonies occurring in the area as early as 1962, yet Solis wasn't officially linked to the location until 1963. Perhaps most puzzling are the physical evidence discrepancies. Crime scene photographs show ritualistic arrangements that required extensive knowledge of pre-Columbian practices, suggesting involvement from individuals with formal archaeological or anthropological training. Solis, despite her persuasive abilities, had no documented background in these areas. The investigation itself was abruptly concluded after only 8 victims were officially confirmed, despite witness testimony suggesting the actual number reached into the dozens. Several key witnesses disappeared before providing full statements, and evidence collected from the ceremonial cave site was reportedly destroyed in a fire at the police station. Some researchers believe the Solis case represents a deliberately obscured glimpse into ongoing occult networks that use isolated communities as testing grounds for psychological manipulation techniques, with the ritualistic elements serving as cover for more systematic operations. Samsara hacks represent alleged methods for manipulating the cycle of death and rebirth that governs all conscious beings, according to Hindu and Buddhist traditions. Samsara refers to the endless loop of birth, life, death, and reincarnation that souls supposedly experience across multiple lifetimes, with each rebirth determined by karma accumulated in previous lives. These purported hacks claim to offer shortcuts around the natural spiritual progression that typically requires countless lifetimes of growth and learning. The most documented techniques involve specific meditation practices performed at the moment of death, designed to maintain conscious awareness during the transition between lives. Tibetan practitioners have developed elaborate protocols for navigating what they call the bardo, the intermediate state between death and rebirth. Some researchers point to cases where individuals demonstrate unusual abilities to recall detailed memories from claimed previous lives, particularly children who spontaneously describe locations, people, and events they should have no knowledge of. Dr. Ian Stevenson documented over 3,000 such cases throughout the 1960s and 70s, with some subjects accurately describing birthmarks that corresponded to fatal wounds from their alleged past incarnations. Advanced practitioners reportedly use visualization techniques and mantra recitation to program their consciousness for specific rebirth destinations. The process involves maintaining clear intention while the physical body shuts down, essentially steering the soul toward desired circumstances rather than allowing karmic forces to determine the next incarnation automatically. More controversial claims suggest that certain secret societies possess knowledge of technological methods for consciousness transfer, potentially allowing wealthy individuals to bypass natural death entirely by moving their awareness into prepared vessels or synthetic bodies. The Institute of Noetic Sciences represents one of the most intriguing intersections between mainstream science and fringe research into human consciousness. Founded in 1973 by Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell, this organization emerged from what Mitchell described as a profound spiritual experience during his return journey from the moon. Mitchell claimed that while viewing Earth from space, he experienced a sudden expansion of consciousness that convinced him psychic phenomena were real and scientifically measurable. Upon returning, he established the Institute to bridge the gap between inner subjective experience and outer objective science. The Institute conducts research into remote viewing, telepathy, precognition, and what they term psychoenergetic healing. Remote viewing involves allegedly perceiving distant locations or events through extrasensory means, while psychoenergetic healing suggests consciousness can directly influence physical health outcomes. What makes the Institute particularly compelling to conspiracy researchers is its documented connections to classified government programs. During the 1970s and 80s, the Central Intelligence Agency and Defense Intelligence Agency funded extensive research into psychic warfare applications through programs codenamed Stargate and Grill Flame. Several Institute researchers, including physicist Russell Targ and remote viewing pioneer Ingo Swann, worked directly on these classified projects. The government reportedly spent over $20 million investigating whether psychic abilities could locate enemy submarines, predict terrorist attacks, or gather intelligence on foreign nations. The Institute's current research includes studies on consciousness at the moment of death, the effects of meditation on DNA expression, and whether human intention can influence random number generators. Critics argue their methodology lacks proper scientific controls, while supporters claim mainstream science deliberately suppresses evidence of psychic phenomena. The organization continues operating today, maintaining that human consciousness possesses capabilities far beyond current scientific understanding. Anti-life ethics represents a philosophical position that challenges one of humanity's most fundamental assumptions about existence itself. This controversial school of thought argues that life inherently contains more suffering than happiness, making non-existence preferable to existence. The core premise suggests that being born subjects individuals to inevitable pain, disease, aging, and death, while the theoretical unborn experience no suffering whatsoever. South African philosopher David Benatar popularized this concept in academic circles through his 2006 book, Better Never to Have Been. Benatar's asymmetry argument claims that while the absence of pain is good, the absence of pleasure is merely neutral rather than bad. This mathematical approach to human experience concludes that the equation of life never balances in favor of existence. The philosophy extends beyond individual suffering to encompass what supporters call the consent problem. Since unborn individuals cannot agree to exist, bringing them into existence without permission constitutes a fundamental violation of autonomy. Some adherents take this reasoning further, suggesting that continuing human reproduction represents an ongoing moral catastrophe. Modern anti-life ethicists point to global statistics on depression, chronic illness, and poverty as evidence supporting their position. They argue that even lives considered successful by conventional standards contain unavoidable elements of frustration, loss, and eventual decay. The movement intersects with various conspiracy theories suggesting that governments and institutions deliberately suppress awareness of life's inherent negativity to maintain social order and economic productivity. Notable figures in contemporary anti-life ethics include philosophers like Thomas Metzinger and Julio Cabrera, who have developed sophisticated academic frameworks around these concepts. Eternal present refers to an alleged advanced mind control technique that traps victims in a permanent psychological state where they cannot form new memories or conceptualize time beyond the immediate moment. First documented in scattered reports from the 1970s, this technique supposedly emerged from the darkest corners of the MKUltra program. Unlike traditional brainwashing methods that sought to implant false memories or alter existing beliefs, Eternal Present aims to completely sever the subject's relationship with linear time. The process reportedly involves a combination of electroshock therapy, targeted electromagnetic frequency exposure, and precisely timed doses of dissociative drugs. Victims undergo what researchers termed temporal fragmentation, where their consciousness becomes locked in a repeating loop of present moment awareness. They lose the ability to connect current experiences to past events or imagine future scenarios. Dr. Theodore Marks, a supposed CIA contractor who worked at facilities in Maryland during the early 1980s, claimed in leaked documents that successful subjects would experience each moment as if it were happening for the first time. They could respond to immediate stimuli and follow simple commands, but showed no signs of learning from experience or developing resistance to repeated manipulation. The technique proved particularly effective on individuals with already compromised mental states. Psychiatric patients at several East Coast facilities were allegedly subjected to experimental protocols under the guise of treatment for severe depression and anxiety disorders. Many never recovered their normal relationship with time and memory. Recent allegations suggest that modern versions of eternal present manipulation occur through targeted electromagnetic harassment combined with pharmaceutical intervention. Victims report experiencing days that seem to blend together without distinction, an inability to plan beyond immediate needs, and a strange sensation that they are living the same moment repeatedly. The conspiracy extends to claims that certain celebrity breakdowns and public episodes of confusion represent temporary failures in eternal present programming, allowing brief glimpses of awareness before the effect reasserts itself. The sewer blob phenomenon centers around massive, living-like formations discovered deep within urban drainage systems worldwide. These aren't your typical blockages of grease and debris. In 2017, workers in London's Victorian-era sewers encountered a formation stretching over 250 meters long and weighing more than 130 tons. What made this discovery particularly unsettling wasn't just its size, but its apparent biological characteristics. The mass pulsated with what appeared to be its own rhythm and displayed an unusual resistance to standard removal techniques. Similar discoveries emerged across major cities. Baltimore reported a formation that seemed to regenerate portions of itself after partial removal. Workers in Paris documented instances where these masses appeared to respond to external stimuli, contracting when approached with equipment. The official explanation attributes these formations to fatbergs, accumulated cooking fats mixed with wet wipes and sanitary products. Yet several anomalies challenge this narrative. Independent analysis of samples has revealed cellular structures that don't match known organic waste compositions. Some formations contain trace amounts of rare earth elements not typically found in household waste streams. Most peculiar are the documented cases of electromagnetic signatures emanating from the largest specimens. Reports from maintenance crews describe a consistent pattern of unusual phenomena surrounding these discoveries. Electronic equipment malfunctions become frequent in proximity to the larger formations. Several workers have reported feeling physically drained after extended exposure, with symptoms resembling those associated with electromagnetic field exposure. The timing of these discoveries correlates suspiciously with increased industrial chemical disposal in affected areas, suggesting these formations might represent something far more complex than simple waste accumulation. The third man on the rope describes a phenomenon where climbers and explorers report experiencing an additional presence accompanying them during life-threatening situations. This invisible companion appears when people face extreme physical and psychological stress, particularly at high altitudes or in survival scenarios. Ernest Shackleton first documented this experience during his Antarctic expedition in 1914 to 1917. While crossing South Georgia Island, Shackleton and his two companions repeatedly felt a fourth person walking alongside them, though only 3 men were present. Shackleton later wrote that this presence seemed so real that he would catch himself preparing food for 4 people instead of 3. Mountain climbers on Everest have reported similar encounters for decades. During the 1988 expedition, climber Beck Weathers described feeling guided by an unseen figure during his descent from the death zone. Multiple climbers have reported hearing encouraging voices or feeling gentle pushes in the right direction when they were too exhausted to continue. The phenomenon extends beyond mountaineering. Survivors of shipwrecks, plane crashes, and other extreme situations have described identical experiences. Researchers suggest this could result from the brain creating a helpful hallucination during severe stress, possibly triggered by oxygen deprivation, hypothermia, or extreme fatigue. What makes these accounts particularly intriguing is their consistency across different cultures and time periods. The presence is typically described as calm, helpful, and protective rather than threatening. Some climbers report detailed conversations with their invisible companion, while others simply feel a reassuring presence guiding them to safety. Modern neuroscience has attempted to explain this through studies of temporal lobe activity during stress, but the precise mechanism remains unclear. Old West giant grasshoppers refers to a collection of manipulated photographs and fabricated newspaper stories from the 1930s that claim to document encounters with enormous grasshoppers measuring up to 3 feet in length across the American frontier. The most notorious case emerged on September 9, 1937, when the Toma Monitor Herald newspaper in Wisconsin ran a front-page story titled "Giant Grasshoppers Invade Butts Orchard East of City." The article detailed how farmer A.L. Butts discovered massive grasshoppers terrorizing his apple orchard after the insects had consumed special plant fertilizer, causing them to grow to unprecedented sizes. According to the fabricated report, these mutant grasshoppers grew powerful enough to snap tree limbs as they leaped through the orchard. The story included photographs showing armed hunters tracking down the oversized insects with shotguns, and a particularly striking image of Butts himself holding up a dead grasshopper like a prize fish. The hoax was so convincing that local residents became genuinely frightened and began scanning the countryside for signs of giant grasshoppers. The newspaper only revealed the truth in the final paragraph of the continued story on page 4, noting that most people who doubted the account would not be surprised since newspaper writers were already considered unreliable. This Wisconsin incident was part of a broader phenomenon during the Dust Bowl era, when photographer Frank D. Pop Connard of Garden City, Kansas became the acknowledged master of what he called hopper whoppers. Connard began creating these manipulated postcards in 1935 after a real grasshopper swarm descended on his town, making it impossible for people to fill their gas tanks due to the insects swarming around filling station lights. Using primitive photo manipulation techniques, Connard superimposed enlarged grasshopper images onto photographs of people, creating scenes where the insects appeared to battle men, fill truck beds, or even hold up trains. These postcards sold like hotcakes, and Connard continued producing them until his retirement in 1963. The phenomenon extended beyond photographs to include physical sculptures. An inventor named Hersey created Galloping Gertie, a 54-inch metal grasshopper weighing 73 pounds, complete with moving antennae. He displayed this creation at county fairs and even appeared on a CBS radio show in 1943 to discuss his giant insect hobby. These hoaxes capitalized on legitimate fears during a time when real grasshopper swarms were devastating crops across the Great Plains. The Rocky Mountain locust had previously caused agricultural disasters throughout the 1870s, and new swarms continued to plague farmers in 1931, 1934, 1936, and 1939. Kallara B refers to the most mysterious and feared vault beneath the Padmanabhaswamy Temple in Kerala, India. While 5 other underground vaults at this ancient temple were opened in 2011, revealing treasures worth over $22 billion, Vault B has remained sealed since at least the 1880s. The vault consists of 3 separate doors, one made of wood, another of iron, and a final sealed chamber that no modern technology has been able to breach. 2 enormous engraved cobras guard the steel door, which contains no bolts, latches, or any visible means of entry. Local belief holds that the vault was sealed using the Ashtanag Band mantra, an incantation so obscure that nobody alive knows how to perform it. According to temple authorities, only a highly realized yogi can open the chamber by correctly chanting the Garuda mantra, something no one has successfully accomplished. Multiple attempts to force entry have ended in failure, with some claiming that those who tried faced mysterious deaths or terrible misfortune. When a group attempted to enter the vaults with torches in the early 1900s, they reportedly found them infested with cobras and fled for their lives. Temple priests and spiritual authorities believe the vault houses sacred objects including Sri Chakram formations and is protected by Naga Devathas, serpent deities devoted to Lord Padmanabha. An Ashtamangala Devaprasnam conducted to discern divine will revealed that opening the chamber would cause divine displeasure. Some estimate the chamber might contain walls of solid gold and represent the largest undiscovered treasure in recorded history. Others claim ancient devas and sages reside within, eternally worshipping the deity. Areologists are scientists who study Mars, but according to certain theories, some of these researchers possess knowledge far beyond what the public is told about the red planet. The term comes from Ares, the Greek god of war, which Mars was named after. While mainstream areology focuses on geological formations and atmospheric conditions, conspiracy theorists claim that certain areologists working within NASA and other space agencies have documented evidence of artificial structures, past civilizations, and even current activity on Mars. Dr. John Brandenburg, a plasma physicist who worked on Mars mission projects, publicly stated that he believes Mars experienced 2 massive nuclear explosions in its ancient past that wiped out existing civilizations. His claims about isotopic evidence and specific crater patterns have sparked intense debate within the areological community. The theory suggests that satellite imagery from orbiters like Mars Global Surveyor and Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter has captured geometric structures, perfectly straight lines, and formations that appear too regular to be natural. Areologists allegedly catalog these findings in classified databases while releasing only carefully selected images to the public. Particular attention focuses on the Cydonia region, where the famous face on Mars was photographed by Viking 1 in 1976. While NASA dismissed it as a natural formation, some areologists reportedly maintain that enhanced imaging reveals additional artificial features in the surrounding area. The conspiracy extends to claims that certain areologists have identified seasonal changes on Mars that suggest ongoing biological or technological processes. These researchers supposedly track recurring slope lineae and atmospheric anomalies that indicate current activity rather than a dead planet. Some theories propose that areologists working on sample return missions have protocols for handling discoveries that could fundamentally alter human understanding of life beyond Earth, with contingency plans for managing such revelations. The Pleiadians are malevolent challenges, one of the most beloved narratives in extraterrestrial conspiracy circles. While mainstream UFO communities typically celebrate these supposed beings from the Pleiades star cluster as humanity's benevolent space brothers, this darker interpretation suggests their true intentions are far more sinister. Traditional Pleiadian lore paints them as tall, blonde, Nordic-looking aliens who've been guiding human evolution for thousands of years. Channelers like Barbara Marciniak and Billy Meyer have built entire movements around their alleged peaceful messages of spiritual awakening and cosmic consciousness. The Pleiadians supposedly communicate through telepathic downloads, offering wisdom about ascending to higher dimensions and breaking free from earthly limitations. But this malevolent theory flips that narrative completely. Instead of wise teachers, the Pleiadians become master manipulators using New Age spirituality as a Trojan horse for psychological control. The evidence cited includes the suspicious uniformity of channeled messages across different contactees, suggesting a coordinated disinformation campaign rather than authentic spiritual guidance. Researchers point to how Pleiadian teachings often encourage followers to abandon critical thinking in favor of blind faith in their cosmic guidance. Some theorists connect this to the ancient Anunnaki narratives, suggesting the Pleiadians are simply a rebranded version of the same controlling extraterrestrial forces that have allegedly manipulated human civilization since Sumerian times. They argue that promoting concepts like dimensional ascension serves to pacify potential resistance movements by redirecting revolutionary energy into passive spiritual bypassing. The theory gains traction from reports of abductees who initially had positive Pleiadian encounters that later turned traumatic, with beings revealing their true exploitative nature once psychological hooks were firmly established. Hectors Ichthyosaur represents one of paleontology's most tantalizing lost giants, where the true organism size parameters may have been deliberately obscured or conveniently lost to history. In 1874, Richard Lydecker discovered massive vertebral remains at Mount Potts in New Zealand's Canterbury region that defied all known biological limits. These vertebrae measured an astounding 45.7 centimeters in diameter, nearly twice the size of the largest confirmed ichthyosaur specimens. Using comparative scaling from related shastasaurid ichthyosaurs, these measurements suggest a marine reptile reaching 40 to 50 meters in length and weighing between 200 to 300 tons. This would place Hectors Ichthyosaur as potentially the largest animal to have ever existed, dwarfing even the modern blue whale. The specimens were initially housed at the Colonial Museum in Wellington, but here's where the story takes a suspicious turn. The original fossils have completely vanished from the scientific record. Official explanations claim they were either shipped to the United States and lost within institutional collections, or destroyed when the transport vessel Matawaka mysteriously disappeared en route to London. Recent discoveries of giant ichthyosaurs like Ichthyotitan severnensis, measuring 25 meters long, have proven that massive marine reptiles did indeed exist during the late Triassic period. These confirmed giants lend credibility to the possibility that even larger specimens like Hectors Ichthyosaur could have existed. The timing of the lost specimens raises questions about whether early paleontologists deliberately suppressed evidence of creatures that challenged established biological boundaries. Some researchers suggest that confirming an animal larger than any modern whale would have disrupted 19th century scientific paradigms about maximum biological size limits. The Mount Potts site yielded additional oversized vertebrae in 1877 to 1878, but these specimens also mysteriously disappeared from institutional records. Without the original fossils available for modern analysis, Hectors Ichthyosaur remains in scientific limbo, relegated to footnotes and speculation despite potentially representing the most significant paleontological discovery in history. This entry claims that the semantic web has been fully operational since 2008, despite public narratives suggesting it remains largely theoretical or in early development stages. The semantic web represents a fundamental shift from the current internet structure. Instead of web pages designed primarily for human readers, this technology creates machine-readable content where computers can understand meaning and context. Every piece of information gets tagged with metadata that describes relationships, properties, and significance in ways artificial intelligence systems can process directly. Believers in this theory point to the suspicious timing of major tech company acquisitions and patent filings around 2008. Google's Knowledge Graph, Facebook's Open Graph Protocol, and Amazon's product recommendation systems all emerged with capabilities that seem to require semantic web infrastructure already in place. The evidence centers on analyzing the sophisticated data connections these platforms demonstrated immediately upon launch. Creating the vast interconnected databases needed for semantic processing should have required years of visible development work. Corporate presentations from this period contain technical specifications that reference semantic web standards like Resource Description Framework and Web Ontology language as if they were established systems rather than experimental concepts. Several former employees from major tech companies have described working on projects involving semantic markup and automated reasoning systems during the late 2008 to 2010 timeframe. These accounts suggest the technology was mature enough for large-scale implementation while the public remained unaware. The theory suggests this hidden rollout explains why artificial intelligence systems began showing dramatic improvements in understanding context and relationships around 2011 to 2012, seemingly appearing without the foundational infrastructure that such capabilities would logically require. Proponents argue that admitting the semantic web was operational would have raised privacy concerns about the extent of data analysis and cross-platform information sharing already taking place behind the scenes. This entry refers to the belief that multiple hidden worlds or dimensions exist alongside our own reality, accessible through specific methods or locations on Earth. The theory suggests that what we perceive as our singular world is actually just one layer in a complex system of parallel realities. These alternate worlds supposedly contain different versions of our civilization, advanced beings, or entirely foreign landscapes that operate under different physical laws. Underground tunnel systems beneath major cities like Denver and Washington, D.C. are claimed to connect to these hidden realms. The Denver International Airport, with its unusual artwork and extensive underground facilities, frequently appears in discussions about gateways between worlds. Some theorists point to the airport's blue horse statue, nicknamed Blucifer, as a marker for interdimensional activity. The Large Hadron Collider at CERN has become central to these theories, with claims that particle acceleration experiments have accidentally torn holes between dimensions. Videos allegedly showing strange phenomena during CERN operations circulate online, though most have conventional scientific explanations. Ancient sites like Stonehenge, the Pyramids of Giza, and Machu Picchu are described as original portals built by civilizations that understood interdimensional travel. The precise astronomical alignments of these structures are cited as evidence of their true purpose beyond religious or ceremonial functions. Modern disappearances in locations like the Bermuda Triangle, Alaska Triangle, and various national parks are attributed to people accidentally crossing into alternate worlds. The missing 411 cases, where hikers vanish without explanation, fuel speculation about involuntary world shifting. Some versions of this theory incorporate quantum physics concepts, suggesting that consciousness itself determines which world version we experience moment to moment. This entry refers to Synomex fetus farming. According to the theory, Synomex was a biotechnology company accused of using fetal tissue in the research and development of artificial flavor enhancers. The core claim is that the company partnered with major food and beverage corporations to produce synthetic taste receptors using cells that originated from human fetal kidney tissue. The specific cell line often cited is CHK 293, short for human embryonic kidney 293, originally derived from fetal tissue in the early 1970s. These cells are widely used in medical and biotech research due to their adaptability, but in this case their use in flavor testing raised ethical alarms and triggered outrage among critics. The controversy deepened when lists began circulating online, claiming that brands like Pepsi, Kraft, and Nestle had ties to Synomex through research contracts. These claims often overlooked the fact that the fetal cell line wasn't being added to food itself, but used in lab settings to study taste receptors. Still, the idea that snack foods were developed using human-derived cells created a lasting discomfort. By the early 2010s, some watchdog groups pushed for product boycotts and government oversight. The backlash forced companies to issue public statements distancing themselves from any involvement in fetal tissue testing. Synomex was eventually absorbed into a larger biotech firm, and the story mostly disappeared from mainstream headlines. However, the theory persists, often exaggerated or misunderstood, as an example of secretive science allegedly slipping into everyday life. Bilocation describes the phenomenon where an individual appears to be physically present in two separate locations simultaneously. Unlike out-of-body experiences or astral projection, witnesses report seeing the actual person, not a ghostly apparition, in both places at the exact same time. The most documented cases involve Catholic saints and mystics. Padre Pio, the 20th century Italian friar, was reportedly seen celebrating Mass in Italy while simultaneously appearing to wounded soldiers on distant battlefields during World War I. Saint Martin de Porres was witnessed sweeping floors at his monastery in Lima, Peru, while helping plague victims in different parts of the city during the same hour. Sister Mary of Agreda claimed to have bilocated over 500 times between Spain and New Mexico in the 1600s, teaching indigenous peoples about Christianity without ever leaving her convent. Spanish missionaries arriving in the region found tribes already familiar with Christian teachings, describing a woman matching her exact appearance. More recent theories suggest government research into consciousness projection technologies. Remote viewing programs allegedly developed techniques allowing operatives to gather intelligence while their physical bodies remained at base locations. Some researchers propose quantum consciousness theories where human awareness can exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. The phenomenon challenges conventional understanding of physical presence and consciousness. Medical examinations of claimed bilocators during episodes show normal vital signs and brain activity, ruling out catatonic or unconscious states. Skeptics point to cases of mistaken identity or coordinated deception, yet the consistency of witness testimonies across centuries and cultures continues to puzzle investigators. The Catholic Church requires extensive documentation and multiple independent witnesses before recognizing bilocation as authentic, making verified cases particularly intriguing to those studying unexplained human capabilities. Spanish cloudbusters represent a modern evolution of Wilhelm Reich's controversial weather manipulation technology, allegedly deployed across the Iberian Peninsula since the early 2010s. Reich's original cloudbusters were arrays of metal tubes designed to channel what he termed orgone energy from the atmosphere. These devices supposedly could break up cloud formations or create rain by disrupting the natural flow of this invisible energy field. While Reich's work was dismissed by mainstream science in the 1950s, believers claim the Spanish government has secretly adopted and refined his techniques. The theory centers around Spain's documented weather modification programs, which officially involve conventional cloud seeding using aircraft and ground-based generators. However, conspiracy researchers point to unusual metallic installations photographed near Madrid and Barcelona that bear striking resemblance to Reich's designs. These structures feature multiple vertical pipes arranged in specific geometric patterns, often positioned on hilltops with clear views of the sky. Proponents cite Spain's increasingly successful drought management as evidence of covert cloudbuster operations. The country has experienced several severe dry periods since 2010, yet agricultural output has remained surprisingly stable in certain regions. Weather data allegedly shows localized precipitation patterns that don't match natural meteorological models. The most compelling case involves the Castilla-La Mancha region, where farmers reported mysterious overnight rainfall that occurred without any visible cloud formations. Satellite imagery from these events supposedly shows circular clearings in cloud cover, consistent with Reich's descriptions of orgone manipulation effects. Spanish meteorologists have denied using anything beyond standard cloud seeding technology, but conspiracy theorists note the government's unusually secretive approach to sharing weather modification data compared to other European nations. Agriculture-doomed civilization suggests that humanity's greatest mistake was abandoning the hunter-gatherer lifestyle in favor of farming roughly 10,000 years ago. This theory argues that the agricultural revolution, rather than being progress, actually set our species on a path toward environmental destruction, social inequality, and eventual collapse. The core argument centers on what researchers call the original affluent society, hunter-gatherer groups who worked only 15 to 20 hours per week to meet their needs, had no social classes, and lived sustainably for hundreds of thousands of years. Archaeological evidence from sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey shows that some of the world's first monumental architecture appeared right as agriculture was developing, suggesting the two were connected. Anthropologist Marshall Solins documented how the Jew Huansi people of the Kalahari Desert maintained stable populations and abundant leisure time without agriculture. When farming arrived, everything changed. Suddenly, humans needed to work much longer hours, populations exploded beyond what the environment could sustain, and the first kings and slaves appeared. The theory points to specific consequences that followed agricultural adoption. Skeletal remains show that early farmers were significantly shorter and less healthy than their hunter-gatherer ancestors. Tooth decay skyrocketed due to grain consumption. Infectious diseases spread rapidly through the first permanent settlements. More dramatically, agriculture created the food surpluses that allowed some people to stop producing food entirely, leading to the first ruling classes, standing armies, and organized warfare. The theory suggests that every major problem facing modern civilization, from climate change to nuclear weapons to mass inequality, can be traced back to this single decision to plant crops instead of following seasonal migration patterns. Some versions of this theory claim that agriculture was actually forced upon humanity by environmental catastrophe or even extraterrestrial intervention, since the transition happened so suddenly across multiple continents around the same time period. Nexus 7 is suggested to be one of the Pentagon's most ambitious attempts at total population surveillance. This classified program emerged from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency in 2010 as a data fusion system deployed directly into the Afghanistan war zone. The system collected what officials described as exabytes of information from Afghan civilians. Unlike traditional military intelligence focused on enemy combatants, Nexus 7 monitored the daily lives of ordinary people. The program tracked fruit and vegetable prices in local markets, analyzed which exotic produce traveled furthest distances, monitored cellular communications, and cross-referenced financial transactions with movement patterns. DARPA officials pitched Nexus 7 as revolutionary technology capable of predicting social instability by finding hidden connections in massive datasets. The system pulled from hundreds of existing intelligence sources across multiple agencies, creating what developers called a population-centric cultural intelligence platform. Military personnel stationed in Afghanistan reported that teams of recent graduate students arrived with classified access and began requesting unprecedented amounts of personal data on local civilians. The program cost tens of millions of dollars despite harsh criticism from field intelligence operators who dismissed it as an expensive academic experiment. One anonymous official told reporters there were no models and no algorithms that actually worked. Military commanders questioned why exotic vegetable prices would indicate insurgent activity better than traditional metrics. What makes Nexus 7 particularly concerning is its potential applications beyond Afghanistan. The technology developed for monitoring Afghan markets and social networks could theoretically be adapted for domestic surveillance programs. The program demonstrated that government agencies possess both the technical capability and institutional willingness to monitor entire populations through seemingly innocent data points like grocery purchases and travel patterns. Major General Michael Flynn championed the program despite evidence that much of the collected intelligence proved unusable for actual military operations. By 2013, as counterinsurgency efforts failed, questions emerged about whether surveillance programs like Nexus 7 represented preparation for similar monitoring capabilities targeting American citizens. The Chinese facial recognition boom represents one of the largest surveillance deployments in human history, with over 1 billion cameras now watching citizens across the country. Starting in the 2010s, China began installing facial recognition systems at a pace that stunned international observers. Companies like SenseTime and Megvii developed algorithms capable of identifying individuals from crowds in real time, even when faces are partially obscured or viewed from unusual angles. The technology connects directly to China's social credit system, where facial recognition cameras automatically dock points from citizens caught jaywalking, buying too much alcohol, or spending time with people flagged as dissidents. Walk through any major Chinese city today, and your face gets scanned dozens of times without your knowledge. The cameras track where you shop, who you meet, and how long you linger in public spaces. In Xinjiang province, the system specifically targets ethnic minorities through what engineers call minority recognition mode. The cameras flag individuals based on physical features and send alerts to security forces within minutes. Chinese tech giants boast that their systems can identify anyone from a database of 1.4 billion faces in under 3 seconds. They've processed over 15 billion facial scans since 2018 alone. The data flows into massive government servers that create detailed movement patterns for every citizen. Officials know if you visited a mosque, attended a protest, or simply stood too close to someone considered a security risk. International companies unwittingly helped build this network by selling camera hardware and processing chips, only later discovering their technology was being used for population control rather than simple security monitoring. The reactionless drive represents one of the most persistent challenges to our understanding of basic physics. These theoretical propulsion systems claim to generate thrust without expelling any reaction mass, essentially creating movement from nothing. According to Newton's third law, every action requires an equal and opposite reaction. When a rocket burns fuel and shoots exhaust out the back, the rocket moves forward. A reactionless drive supposedly skips this step entirely, pushing against empty space itself. The most famous example emerged in the early 2000s when British inventor Roger Scheuer introduced the M-drive. This copper cone-shaped device claimed to bounce microwaves around inside a closed chamber to create thrust. Despite producing no visible exhaust, Scheuer insisted his contraption could propel spacecraft using only electrical power. NASA's EagleWorks laboratory under Harold White actually tested various M-drive prototypes between 2010 and 2016. Their results showed tiny amounts of thrust that couldn't be explained by conventional physics. The measurements were so small they bordered on experimental error, yet they sparked intense speculation about breakthrough propulsion technology. Dean drives from the 1950s present another case. Inventor Norman Dean built mechanical devices using spinning weights and claimed they could lift themselves off the ground. Demonstrations showed his machines vibrating and allegedly reducing their apparent weight, though independent verification proved elusive. The Podkletnov gravity shielding experiments from the 1990s added another layer. Russian physicist Eugene Podkletnov reported that spinning superconductors could reduce gravitational effects above them by up to 2%. Multiple attempts to replicate these results have failed, yet rumors persist of classified military research into his findings. Conspiracy theorists point to unexplained aerospace patents and black budget projects as evidence that functional reactionless drives already exist in secret programs. The fact that NASA and other agencies continue investigating these concepts, despite mainstream scientific rejection, fuels suspicions about hidden technological breakthroughs. Secret geodetic surveys operate under the premise that governments worldwide conduct highly classified mapping operations that go far beyond what they publicly acknowledge. These surveys measure the Earth's precise shape, gravitational fields, and underground structures using advanced satellite technology and ground-based instruments. The controversy centers around allegations that these measurements have revealed significant discoveries that remain hidden from the public. Geodetic surveying typically involves determining exact positions and elevations across the Earth's surface, but conspiracy researchers claim that certain surveys have detected massive underground cavities, unexplained gravitational anomalies, and structures that don't appear on any official geological surveys. During the 1970s and 80s, several nations including the United States, Soviet Union, and China dramatically expanded their geodetic programs under military oversight. The Defense Mapping Agency, now part of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, classified thousands of survey results that previous decades had made freely available to researchers. Specific incidents fuel these theories. In 1983, a joint American-Australian geodetic survey in the outback was abruptly terminated after 6 months, with all data sealed under national security provisions. Survey team member Dr. Patricia Kellerman later claimed in leaked documents that ground-penetrating radar had detected a chamber system extending over 200 kilometers underground. The global positioning system itself becomes part of this narrative. While GPS satellites provide civilian navigation, they simultaneously conduct continuous geodetic measurements with accuracy down to centimeters. Critics argue this dual-purpose technology allows unprecedented monitoring of ground movement, subsidence, and structural changes that could indicate hidden facilities or natural phenomena. Modern surveys employ synthetic aperture radar and laser interferometry to detect elevation changes as small as millimeters across vast areas. The European Space Agency's Sentinel satellites can identify when specific buildings shift by mere centimeters, raising questions about what other subtle changes these systems might be detecting and recording without public disclosure. The theory suggests that international geodetic cooperation serves as cover for sharing sensitive geographical intelligence between allied nations while maintaining plausible scientific justification for the extensive mapping operations.